July 8th, 2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field, and we will, or you could send questions in advance to clubcubase at steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase you are running. So if you're running Cubase 12, 13, or 14, which levels, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information is helpful. And also which operating system you're utilizing. We will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, because we may have lots of questions kind of piled up in queue, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We should have an index of all the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. I'll take a dinner break and do the index. But that will have timestamps, so you can navigate directly to a particular topic. If you wanted to search for timestamps from previous live streams, we've covered over 40,000 different topics. You can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan in Stockholm for creating the wonderful site. We have two people that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience. So we want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude and to Agent K. One other wonderful resource of information that is available that's beneficial to the Steinberg community is the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. And for that, we'll give Jazz Dude an extra special thanks for his efforts with that. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from in the United States, outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching the live stream or attending it live, or even if you're just watching it afterwards, just introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right. All right, so we see Val checking in as Y42 from Vienna. We have James Bestani sending greetings from Beverly Hills. Thanks for joining us, being part of the community. All right, we see Stefan from Sweden. We have Dean Garvey Jazz from the Southern Sierra Mountains, just north of Los Angeles, a beautiful area. I've driven through there many times. We have Martin joining from Germany. And Martin's has two questions. His first question is, it says, I'm also a Nuendo user. When Nuendo is installed on my machine, do I need Cubase on this machine as well for any reason? So if you're running like Cubase, if you have Cubase 14 and Nuendo 14 will have all of the features that are found in Cubase 14. So there's nothing unique that's going to be in Cubase that's not in Nuendo. So Nuendo will have all of the Cubase functionality plus additional advanced audio, professional audio tools like Game Audio Connect, ADR stuff. So, but all of the functionality in Nuendo 14 would be in Cubase 14. There is often several months from release that Cubase, when Cubase is first released, that Cubase may have features that are not available in Nuendo until it is updated. It takes longer to update it. It's not a conspiracy theory. There's more features. So it takes longer for the Nuendo to version up to be at the same version as Cubase. But once it is, it'll have all of that generation of Cubase features plus additional professional audio functionality and solutions. So if you have Nuendo 14, it has all the features of Cubase 14. But if you have Nuendo 13 and Cubase 14, there will be features in Cubase 14 not available in Nuendo 13 until Nuendo 14 is released. All right, so we see Matt Elston just says, hello, Greg, everyone in Cubase, totally appreciate the amazing live streams and learning so much from them. Cubase is fantastic. Thank you for everyone who contributes. It's a great sentiment to share, and hope you're doing well, Matt. And we have Uno Memento checking in from Finland, where he says the rain has finally stopped, at least for a while. So, all right, we see Benny from Sweden. Okay, he says, question, last time you showed me about starting anywhere in the project. For me, it doesn't work. Just selecting outside the tracks works, but not when I hover over a track. All right, so let's say, let's have kind of a longer part of a file here. All right, so when we want to do this, let's just come over, so say. So I'll just solo this. So I think it was just with the object selection tool, that holding down Alt or Option plus Shift, anywhere that we click. So if I click right here in time, now there is a preference or setting depending on your operating system. If you go to transport, so you could say locate when clicked in empty place. So that, you know, and why we have the modifier keys is if I click here on an event, we select the event, but holding down the Alt or Option plus the Shift key while it's playing, I could click in an empty space or click directly on top of an event and navigate the playhead position. So once again, Alt or Option plus the Shift key and click anywhere, and then you could move the playhead. So let me know if that works for you. I don't think that that is contingent or with the click in empty spaces icon, but I will preference rather. I will go ahead and disable that. So now if I click in an empty space, it doesn't immediately go there. So now Alt or Option plus Shift, it goes anywhere, whether I'm clicking on an event or not. So it seems to function independently of the locate when clicked in empty spaces preference. So let me know if that makes sense, Benny, or if other people run into that. All right, we have another question, second question from Martin. It says, my second question is, I have a Waveshare 11.9 HDMI, displays my third monitor, 1480 by 320px, so it's kind of letterbox. How can I move Nuendo timecode or other meter to the small display and turn it into full screen? So I don't think if we go to supervision, so I'll just come over here, let's get to my inserts, let's pop over to supervision. So, and if we switch this, I'll just go ahead and remove this one here, and we'll go to other. I think we'll have our timecode display, and if we wanted to, let's say, be simply timecode. All right, so now what we could do is just simply, if that monitor on your system, like if you come over, and this will be Mac specific, but if you go to your displays, I'll just do a quick search here. That you'll see kind of like your different, you'll see arrange multiple displays, and Windows will have something similar, and then you could choose for this to mirror or extend. So basically, when it's in extend mode, you can move your cursor from left to right, and as you go over, and you could position it so that as you move from left to right, that your cursor just navigates over. So all you would have to do is just kind of drag if you have like the timecode window or the supervision. I don't think that there is kind of a full screen mode. If we go to your studio menu and go to our time display here, I think it's under more options. Let's see if it's, yeah, our time display. Then we can just come over here, and if you want it to have that kind of resized, you can resize it to fit the screen and just simply drag it over to your screen. So it could be you might have to drag it up, to the right, left, or down, depending on how you have your multiple monitors configured in your display resolutions. But I don't think, yeah, that there is a, while it could be resized, you might have the white frame around it. So, but once you have that monitor configured in your system, just simply drag it over to the other screen and make it, and just kind of manually resize it, and then you should be all set with that. All right, we see Jan from Cubase Index on. We also saw Jazz Dude on earlier. I think Jazz Dude's on as well from Germany. Thanks for making the community so great. All right. We see Jan giving kudos to Jazz Dude for. All right. Martin is just saying to everyone, by the way, the new Spectral Layers 12 is awesome. So we see Ryan Thomas says the Cubase beta entry over. So if I was involved in the beta program, I can't really discuss it. So I'm kind of would be under a non-disclosure agreement with that. So may not have started. Who knows? Okay, so we have a question from Val. It says, I have a 35-minute recording of multiple songs from a DJ live set, and I want my tempo track to match the changes. When I do tempo detection of the whole recording, it messes up everything bad. Okay, so let's say I want it to come over. Let's just do a new project here. I don't think I have any. I used to have kind of like a long form classical. Okay, so let me just come over here. Let's say we have maybe a longer piece here, and we want to do tempo detection on it. So, generally the tempo detection may be like on a file by file basis. So let's say if I come here and I just want to, like, these are my different songs. All right, and I'll just color these so we could differentiate. Okay, so let's say these are our songs. And if it's one contiguous recording, you might want to just simply copy these particular files here. So let's say, and I would split them at like the beginning and end of each song. I would, at this point, if we want to create new files, probably the easiest way to do it is just do a render in place, go to render settings, and we could choose that we want to render these as separate events. So let me just turn off my record enable. So we can go to our render in place, go to render settings. We'll do these as separate events after they've been split. So this will make new audio files of each one where we had made the cuts. So these are all separate audio files at this point. Select each of the clips, come over here, do a tempo detection. So get to your project menu, to tempo. All right. So again, tempo, to tempo detection. And the tempo detection kind of works, I think, one event at a time. Okay, so let's say we'll just do this for each of the songs. Okay, so now everything's kind of broken. So let's say we have our DJ set and we want my tempo track to match the changes. When I do tempo detection, hard recording messes up everything bad. So when you do the tempo detection, you probably don't want this particular file to be in musical mode. So make sure that as you're doing the tempo detection, because we want that as the basis for the tempo of other tracks, and now we want this. So make sure that each of the events, as you select the events, that none of the events are in musical mode. Otherwise, it could be doing a tempo detection against your detected tempo. Now, so that's what you would do with that. And we see, and the second part of the question is, how can I fix all the songs to the same tempo consistently? So if I wanted these to all be the same tempo, I would select the particular event, go to your audio menu, to advanced, and we will choose set definition from tempo. So we'll say we could store this metadata into the actual audio files or just into the project. Either way is fine. And now what you could do is just turn off the tempo track and just type in whatever tempo value you want. And now all of these tracks will use, even though they're changing, will now play back at a steady tempo. So again, select the events, go to audio, to advanced, to set definition from tempo, and that's going to basically embed the tempo changes in. So we have the original tempo track. If you wanted it to be steady, you can turn off or create a new track version. So turn off, and now you can see the full tempo right here, and you can put in a value, and then all of the audio files will be static. We'll have a static tempo, one single tempo, so that they'll all be consistent timing wise. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall sending greetings from Somerset in United Kingdom. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Soren from Sweden. Vasteras, but someone told me I pronounced that wrong once, so I will just always say Sweden. All right, so we have the artist known as Love says, I hope everyone's doing great. Thank you, Greg, for all you do. I've hit the like button. Thanks for joining us today. All right, we see Jan giving kudos to Jazz Dude for the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. All right, so we see from Rashab just says, is it true the sampler track doesn't have a proper amplitude ADSR envelope? All right, let's take a look. All right, let me just... Okay, so I'll open up a quick sampler track here. So we'll get to our sampler control. I'll just drag a sample over into it. Let me normalize it. All right, so if we come over here to your amplifier, so let's go to the amplifier section. We click on, so let's say, so if I just want to come over here, so we could just simply come right over here and adjust. So here's my ADSR right there. Let's make the release longer. So now I released a key. So our attack, decay, sustain, release. So we can just do it right here. And if you want to go crazy with different envelopes here, we could just say, okay, I want, let's say right here, let's switch. So you could do all sorts of great stuff with your envelopes. So it looks like that does that for me, Rashab. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, wonderful to see Flyvy Vince from Winnipeg, Canada. Thanks for being on today. All right. So we see Soren says, Greg, I want the metadata in my mastered file, ISRC code, ASO, but I don't get the ISRC until I distributed the master file, and I'm not supposed to alter the master file after distribution, right? It says, how's that handled, and can you talk about altering the master file and what that results in your knowledge? So I haven't done too much personally with ISRC codes. This would be kind of more Wavelab function. So let's open up Wavelab quickly here. Okay, so let me just come over here. So I know, so let's say, let's come over to our album wizard here. So I'll just kind of get this set up. Get to the album. because I know that we can come over if we go to, let's say, so we could, if we go to the edit CD metadata, or let me just, if it's one of the little icons up here. Okay, so maybe it's just in. All right, let me just see if it's an album wizard here where we could. So in the album wizard is where we could generate the ISRC codes. So I think that we could have it kind of automatically generated, but I'm not sure if this code is actually kind of, if you would need to change it after you send it out for distribution. I could do some research on it for Friday's live stream, Soren. But if anyone else has had experience with that, maybe they could share within the chat. All right. Wonderful to see Dallas LaRue joining from Las Vegas. Yeah, we see Flyvy just says, let's do this. Brian Carter from Alabama says, Cubase 14, is it possible to get automatic crossfades when punching in? Thanks so much. So anytime that you record a file, so there is like an auto fades setting. So if we want to okay. So I'm gonna, what you can do is, and this isn't visual, but when we just come right over here to, let's say we're going to go to a particular audio track, we can see this auto fades setting directly here. So you won't see this visually, but what will happen is anytime that we do, anytime that audio starts to play or begins to play, it will automatically do, and by default it's set to a 10 millisecond fade in or fade out. So that anytime, so we don't see it visually, but it kind of does it on playback, where every single audio file will have, you could have a short fade in or fade out so that you don't have to manually do it every single time. Let's say you got sloppy and you made an edit that wasn't at the zero crossing point, or you're just doing edits. So again, just come directly to the track. You could click right here in this icon just to the right of the listen and just enable auto fade in. And then anytime that audio track starts, it will do a very, very short fade in to eliminate pops and clicks on your recording. And Brian, just curious where in Alabama you are. When I was a little kid, I lived in Huntsville till about first grade. Had a great time there. All right, always wonderful to see Kerwin Young checking in from Atlanta, Georgia. All right, so we see from Soren, just says, Greg, I wish Cubase would have a chord track soon. I wish that the Android version could allow third-party VSTs soon. I'll pass it along. I'm not sure if there's as much of a plugin format for Android OS, but I'll pass it along to the team. All right, Quellen asks, hello, Greg. Can you explain the algorithm of an audio files and the different options to choose and what each one is for and how it works? Okay, so we have different algorithms, and these algorithms often deal with pitch shifting or for like real-time time stretching of audio. So the most popular algorithms are used by many different programs are the Elastique. I believe it's from Z-Plane. So let's say if I want to come over here, we can see we have 9 different algorithms. All right, so they're kind of broken like 3 variations on 3 types of categories. So we have the Elastique Pro, which is going to be the default algorithm. We also have Elastique Pro with formant preservation. So maybe if you're doing a lot of vocal work and you're doing pitch shifting and you realize that it's changing the timbre of the voice, you might want to preserve formants. And there's also efficient. So if you have a older computer, this will take less real-time audio performance. So most people would tend to stay in these top 3. So we have kind of the Pro version if we want formant preservation, or kind of an economy of an efficient mode. Now each of those modes has 3 different variations. There's one that could favor rhythmic aspects, and that's going to be time, and one that could favor more complex harmonics, such as voices, pianos, guitars, and that we may set to pitch. Now we also have the third one of each of these is going to be tape. So tape would, when we change the tempo, slow down the pitch as well as the speed at the same time, much like an analog tape machine. So some people will call that very speed recording. So, in the old days, if we couldn't play a part, George Martin would do it on a lot of Beatles records. He would slow it down to half speed, play a piano solo, and speed it up. So if you think of like the little keyboard solo in My Life, that was played at an octave and half speed. So again, we're going to have, so that's can mimic that. So when we adjust the tempo, if we adjust the tempo slower, not only does the audio slow down, but it changes pitch just like an analog tape machine. So again, we're going to have the Pro, efficient, so more tracks if your computer's having a hard time, as well as the formant preservation. Each of those, we have one that favors rhythms and time, one that favors more harmonic content with pitch, and if you want it to behave like an analog tape machine, use the tape mode. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, great to see Real Raven 2000 on. Says, is there a trick converting automation data and settings of VST2 to VST3, same plugin? I think that, like, if it's, I don't think I have any VST2 plugins on, but if we come over, so let's say if I have, automation data here, and automation data, let's say on this particular track, so if we want to, select the automation data here, we could just say, okay, now I want to paste that automation into this track. So if it's just kind of like the automation data, we could just copy that. If you have a project that's going from VST that had VST2 plugins, and then you're running a VST3 version, and it's not translating the parameter automation correctly. So, sometimes most companies will keep kind of the same order of the parameters. If there is a new feature, it could be that the order has perhaps changed, but the plugin developer can keep the automation order the same and add other elements as needed. So maybe Real Raven 2000, if you could specify if it's a project that's going from a VST2 that has automation on the VST2 version that's not translating to the VST3. And a lot of that could be up to the particular plugin developer to make sure that that's a seamless transition. Like I know when we went from Halligan Sonic SE to Halligan Sonic, all your files that opened in Halligan Sonic SE would automatically open in the new plugin version. But sometimes going from popular samplers from like a 7 to 8 version, it doesn't automatically go to the latest installed version, and that's just a choice that the plugin developer has made, whether it's good or bad. Okay, Mike Braley asks, hi Greg, is there a way to save a VST instrument with channel settings, send, etc., and the send channel itself with effects on it, so it will add an instrument and the send channel? Okay, so I'll just do this. We'll make this nice and clean here in a new project. Okay, so I'm going to add an instrument track. Okay, so let's add maybe a piano here. Okay, so we'll just add an etude. All right. Okay, so we're going to have our piano, and we want to add a reverb to this and save them both together. So if we come over here, we can just say, let's add our effect track to that. I'm going to add a reverence. So let's come over here. We'll put it into an English chapel. All right. So now when you come over, so we have that reverb, and we want to save both of these together. So if we save a track preset, the track preset's going to contain everything that we see up until this end. So it's not contingent upon other tracks. But if we wanted to save this combination, what we could do is right click and we'll go to export selected tracks. So we'll come over and say, okay, we're going to come over here. Let's put it quickly on my desktop so I can find it. And we say piano verb July 8th, 2025. Okay. So now that I've exported, I selected both tracks and exported it. I'm going to come over here. Let's remove the tracks. All right, so now we export selected tracks, and this may seem a little counterintuitive, but we're going to import as a track archive. So we'll say, okay, let's import a track archive. Let's go to my desktop. Let's see if it shows up under recents. All right, maybe not. Okay, so here's my, make sure. Make sure I saved it into, I'll resave that, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to select both of these again. Export the selected tracks. Okay, remove these tracks. So we'll import our track archive. All right, so here's our track archive that we saved. And now when I come over here, let's open it up, we could select all of the tracks. And now when we get a play, the piano and the reverb plugin are recalled together. So if we just want to open up this particular effects return channel, we could see our reverb and our etude piano together. So you want to export select the reverb and the piano and export the selected tracks and import as a track archive. So let me know if that makes sense. All right. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so we see Soren just says, thanks for removing the playhead with the Alt plus Shift, Greg. You're welcome. All right, so Real Raven 2000 says, also, can Control Room Studio inserts be saved? I lose them when I switch sample rates. Okay, so I think what we could do is come over. So let's say in my control room here, so let's say, okay, I want to have, I'll just put compressor and this. So I'm going to go to my studio menu and let's go to my audio connections and to control room. So we can see presets. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to save a preset and we will call this Real Raven. $2,000. Okay. Now let's say if I come over here, I don't have any, let's say I have, we'll put the vocal chain on for some reason. All right, so I have that. So now when I go to, we'll save this as a preset here. So again, go to audio connections. We'll save as preset. All right, so we'll call this vocal chain. Okay, so now if I want to go back to my inserts that were recalled, we'll come over here, we'll go to the Real Raven, recall that preset, and we can see that the plugins will automatically be recalled with the preset as we work with. So go to, again, the studio menu, and you may have to save one at like 48K, one at 96K, something like that, depending on if your I/O is shifting. But go to, again, your audio connections and to the control room and save it as a preset. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right, Contemplate Music just says hello from Derby to the whole beautiful world of Cubase. All right, great to see Sway TV on from New Jersey saying hi to me and the room. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan as well from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Very loyal attendee. All right, so we had Contemplate Music says, how come recently we had a fix to hotfix the most recent fix is Steinberg curdling the quality control and starts relying on us to point out what's not working. So now there's always, you figure a program like Cubase is probably tens of millions of lines of code. So there's a lot of stuff. So, if when there's an issue that, maybe people didn't encounter during testing, and during quality control, I think it's better to issue a hotfix. Like one of the issues was, and we had this come up on the live stream a couple times, that people couldn't use the jog wheel that they had set up from a MIDI remote control. They couldn't utilize that to go backwards. So it could be instead of waiting a couple of months to go through a full quality control cycle, that they, and that's an annoying thing for people, that they issued a hot fix for that. So I think it's probably better, to come out with a hot fix. And sometimes, when you do something like that, a hot fix may not go through every single the level of quality assurance and quality control testing. So, I think they just wanted to get a working solution quickly for customers, realizing that was kind of a pertinent issue for a lot of people using control surfaces. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams checking in from Weatherford, Texas. So we see from Jovanovic 3D, great to see you on again. Hi, Greg. Curious to hear your opinion about Clip Launcher in Cubase. Would the live performance solution even be possible to implement in Cubase? I'm sure that Cubase is set up in a manner where there's lots of capabilities, and obviously when we come out with Cubase, they're able to implement lots of very deep core functionality, such as the modulators that we saw in Cubase 14, going into totally replacing the score editor. So I think anything is possible. So it just hasn't been implemented into Cubase, and we see other programs that have clip launchers that are still copying Cubase features from decades ago. I think I saw one program, it's you could actually render in place and mute the other file automatically as a feature. So all right. All right, so we see from Gregory Malik, it says, Aloha, Greg. Would you please show how to save the settings of a synth and be able to recall them from a favorites folder? Okay, so it may not be in a favorites folder, but let's say if I want to, we'll add a instrument here. Okay, so let's get to a retro log. Okay, so let's say I come over here, we're going to add, and I've now, all right, so let's say this is my fantastic preset. What we could do is I'm going to save the preset. We'll call this July 8th, 2025. Okay, so what you can do, especially in kind of Media Bay, is you could have different. So let's go to our VST instruments. Let's come over here to retro log, and I'll just show it on big Media Bay here. It'll be a little easier to see. All right, so let's say I'm looking at, sounds for retro log. One of the things that we could do is just say, okay, I'm going to come over here to VST sound. Just, let me just look in the factory presets as well. All right, so if we're looking in, like particular like presets here, let me just look for. There's always like different rating systems. So we could actually just come over here and say, okay, I want to select these, and we'll give it like a 3-star rating system. So I could just come over here and just say, okay, I want to only look for, we can see all of our ratings. So let's say my favorite rating here, I'm just going to, let's say we'll make this all 3. And let's say for this one particular preset, so let me just come over here. We could just see only like a 5-star rating. So at this point, we could give it like a 5-star rating. And then when we go to look into different like presets, we could just say, I only want to see like 5-star presets. So this way I could just have, instead of a favorites folder, if you give it a rating and then search by the number of stars for rating, so give your favorites all 5 stars, and then you could just say we want to find 5-star rated presets. So if we jump over here, we could just say and then you could kind of pick and choose like the the number of like stars ratings that you could see for your media bay. So try just giving it a rating of 5 stars, and then you could search through multiple folders and access all of your 5-star settings. All right, so we see Michael Teams is granted Jazz Dude 1 gallon of banana nut ice cream for great Discord and also great moderation. All right, so Uno Memento's got 60 millimeters of rain in Finland. All right, so we see from Martin, just says, I followed your suggestion for the time code and moved it to time display to my letterbox, but would be better full screen, same for any meter. Can you put in a request for that? So let me just check supervision, see if there's like a full screen mode here. So I don't think that there's. Yeah, so I'll mention it to the team, but I think probably without like, it's not a huge border, but there is a border. Let me just see if we come here to our time display. But yeah, I'll mention it to him, but it's probably not the end of the world to see the border, but I'll pass it along regardless. All right, so we have Antoine Van Kampen Is it possible to reorder colors manually in color setup, or to hide colors that do not have a name? So let's come over here to our project colors setup. So I'm not sure if we could. So we could just kind of drag the colors here. And let's see if we go to So let's just give it some names here. So I'm not sure if there's a way to filter. By name or not name. So if we choose to select colors by name when we come over here, we could just hold down like the Alt or Option key. So it'll have a name even if it's not named as being color or whatever. But again, if you go to, so I don't know a way to filter colors that don't have names, because even if it's not named, it will have color so-and-so, color plus the number for a name. But to kind of change the order, just manually come over here and just drag and drop, and you could manually organize the colors. And again, that's in the project color setup, so project menu to project colors setup. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see from Rashab says, thanks, I just couldn't find the ADSR in the sampler track, so all right, have fun with it now. All right. All right, so FlyV just says, thanks for all you do on here and how it's open to the public Cubase users. So yeah, we want to be able to help everyone be able to use our software, the Steinberg software solutions, better. John Koskian is thanking Michael Teams for the digital virtual ice cream. Uno Memento wants people to whack the like button. All right, we see Durface, or Durface, says, Greg, sometimes I have to start a project from a previous project, not a template, and I want to move that whole active project to a new folder. Any way to easily do this, including all active files? All right, so let's say I come over here, I want to take this project here, and all right, and I'll just record a quick audio file. All right, so I'll come over here. We'll just name this. All right, so say. All right, so now we're going to save this project. So we'll come over here. We're going to save this project. So we'll say, okay, so we're going to save. And we'll call this 8 July 2025. Okay, so now I want to start a project with this but maintain all of the files. So to do that, what we could do is just simply come over here and say File menu to backup project. This is going to prompt you for a new folder. So when I come over, we're going to choose a folder. I'll just go to my desktop, new folder, and this will be our new project folder. I'm going to hit create. It's going to allow me to open. So we have AA new project. This is where our new project file is going to go. We'll give it a name. So we'll say full idea. We can keep the current project active if we wanted to. We can minimize audio files, remove unused files. So I'm going to hit OK. So now when I go to look at that project folder, so we go to desktop, and we have AA new project. We'll see that we'll have our audio files here. We'll have our wave file, and here's our project. So I'm going to just open this into Cubase 14. We'll activate the project, and now this is all in the new folder. So if I go to my pool window, we could see our path is going to be from where the audio file is going to be the desktop. If we get to our project setup, we can now come over here. We can see that it's going into our desktop, a new project folder. So again, from the old project, just simply do a backup project. Choose the new folder location, and then open that project up, and you can just start adding tracks, and all of your audio recordings will be going to the new location for you. Let me know if that's helpful for you, and thanks for joining us on the live stream. All right, so we see Brian Carter is from Oxford, Alabama. So don't know where that's at, but I had a wonderful time growing up as a little kid in Huntsville. Okay, so it's not too far away from Huntsville. Yeah, so my dad was in the space program there. It's a lot of fun. All right, so we have Brian Sawyer joining from Beulahville, North Carolina. He's getting ready to head back to Yuma, Arizona in a few hours. He has a 26-foot box truck pulling a Pathfinder. Doesn't sound like fun. I hope you have a safe trip and everything is going well with your move for you and your wife, Brian. All right, great to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. And Brian Carter from Oxford, Alabama just says thanks for your help. All right, so we see Real Raven 2000 says it always switches to normal. So, let me know if I did anything. I assume that this is with the audio connections for the preset. Let me know if I did anything differently than you, but it seems to recall all of the particular settings as expected for me. All right, so we see Brian is getting 2 gallons of banana nut ice cream from Michael Teams, wishing him a safe journey. Brian Carter says, does the global setting on crossfades work on every audio track? So it'll work on every audio track, but you may have to just simply activate it here. So you could just simply do that, and if you start that with like a default, like with a track preset, that could be stored with the track preset, I believe. But once it's turned on, then that same fade can be applied to all the tracks globally. See, Tim Weinheimer's received 1 gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream. Great to see Jay from Secret Studios on. All right, Jorge Paris just says hi from Maputo in Mozambique. Thanks for joining us today, being part of the community. All right, so we see Brian Carter says another question, is there a way to punch in on MIDI track and erase all the MIDI data where you punch in? All right, so let's take a look. So let's say I'll just record 1 single note here. All right, and I have let me take off my All right, so let's say I want to punch in. So there's different record modes. So if we come over here to MIDI, we see linear and cycle recording. Let's choose replace. So let's say I want to punch in, so let's say I want to play this note, so I'll just punch in. All right, so now what the underlying MIDI that was there, so again, and let's say I want to do just a punch and replace, so I'll just set up for like a beat and a half here. So I will activate my punch in. So now when I and then at that point we could just automatically replace the existing MIDI data. So if you come here, you'll see like a little MIDI icon in the left part of the transport. Instead of being new parts or merge, we could choose replace, and we could also access this from the transport menu. So we'll see MIDI record mode, and then we could just simply come right over here and choose replace right there as well. So let me know if that works for you, Brian. All right. All right, so Soren asks, says, Greg, can you explain something for me? When having MIDI tracks with events that play, you can press render settings and choose to mute or leave source track unchanged after render, but if you first click on the marker track and then use the macro to render all MIDI tracks, then this option is not only the two mentioned, but also disable rack, and a fourth option also. Can you explain why clicking marker track makes it a difference to the render selection? Okay, so I don't think it's the marker track, but it's maybe the difference between a track selection and an event selection. So when we go to an event and we have an event selected and we go to render in place and we go to our render settings, we have two choices. Because we're just dealing, with a particular event here. So let's say if we're doing this, I want to render, let's say if I hit the, I want to render this event, but not these two. So when I have an event selected, we could choose to, on our source events, what we do with those. We could choose to leave them unchanged, or just simply come over here and mute the source tracks. All right, so because I may have one event selected and not all the other events, so we can't necessarily do anything at the track level if we have an event selected. So there's different settings for the track level. So now when I come over and I don't have an event selected, but I have the track selected, I go to my render in place. Now I could choose to not only, let me just make sure, hang on. But with the track selected, and we go to render in place, now we get additional options where you could disable the track as well as remove the track. So if an event is selected first, the actual, it doesn't allow us, it's not going to allow us to affect tracks that could have an impact on other events that are on that track. But if the track is selected, then we get additional options for disabling the source track or removing the source track. So we have options at the track level as opposed to just the event level. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Soren. All right, looks like Brian and Michael Teams are going to get together for a visit on their road trip. All right, so Jay from Secret Studio says, hi Greg, I was working in Cubase 14 yesterday to begin working on a project. To find that their MIDI files would not explode chords to their own tracks. Feature removed. If so, please ask for return. So the explode function was part of the score editor in Cubase 13, and I think if we come over, let me just add a chord track here quickly just to populate some chords here. I haven't played around with this a lot, but let's okay. So I think that I haven't played around with this yet, but I think if we go to the logical editor, that we could, so let's say if I'm here in the score editor, we could say extract to track. So we'll say type is equal to note. And we'll say the assigned voice in the score editor is equal to 1. So let's see what. So, but there is, let me just. Let's see. So, I did see that there was a YouTube video. Some guy kind of maybe figured out a way to do it. I didn't get a chance to watch the video, but I know it's kind of in this, like the previous generation score editor. I'll see if I could have kind of an answer for you, Jay, on Friday, but I did see that there was someone that had done a YouTube video on it, and I could see if I could figure out how to present that for Friday's live stream. Jazz Dude will probably Google it and maybe share a quick link, but I know it's not all the functionality in the score editor was implemented. This is just a first generation, but I think obviously we'll see more and more of score functionality coming with the Dorico engine. All right, wonderful. See Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island, Barn Door Recording. Hope you're well. Let me know how Infocom was for you, Lawrence, a couple weeks ago. Probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago now. All right, I see Jazz Dude's already probably posted the video. He's that good. All right, so you see Real Raven 2000 says, I'm not sure that this saves inserts, but I'll try to usually have the measurement, but solo room correction there. Thanks, Greg. So yeah, I believe it does save that. So let me know what you find, Real Raven. It's great to see you back on. All right, so we see from Contemplate Music, just says, thank you, Greg. Great answer. Fully support you and thinking behind it. All right, great to see Tim K from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to all the other cats, including my cat Steven and probably Bark Raven's dog Stella if they join in the live stream. All right, Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas asks, I'm getting a new desktop computer for Cubase. What is the best and easiest way to move the content to my new computer? Cubase is on Drive C, all samples and everything there. Everything else is on Drive D. So as Jazz Dude mentioned in the next comment, you could clone the C partition. Usually installing Cubase is just a couple minutes. Downloading all of the content. So if you have a method, whether it's to your new computer, whether you're networked or using a simple USB flash drive to be able to access and copy to the flash drive and then copy the content directly over to a location. And once you have that location with the content, you could double click on it on like a .vst sound file, and that will open up the Steinberg library manager. And then once you double click a .vst sound file, it could be any of them, at that point it will automatically make the connection to that location on your new computer to the to Cubase, so that Cubase knows to look for the content in that particular location on a new computer. John Costigan has great comments. Says quick and thorough problem solving is one thing that separates Steinberg from other big names in recording production tech. I've suffered through their competitions. I'm always right. All right. All right, so we see Bratman Studio just says running a club that you could take the stream with you even to a waiting room. So we hope you're having a good appointment with your brother. Wish him well for us. All right, wonderful to see Best Green Jesus, who just says his Roland Cloud and native instruments are making themselves too comfortable on his hard drive. So, all right, Mark Lawson says yet to try the drum machine. All right, so I think the drum machine is definitely kind of worth playing around with. So if you haven't experimented with it, what you could do is, it's pretty cool. So if we come over here, we could add a track, and there's a new drum track. So we'll come over, we'll just say, okay, let's get to, and we can make this a MIDI event or a pattern event. So when I come over here, we can now launch this, and we have kind of drum synthesis options. So we could just come over and say, okay, I want a kick, I want a snare on this. So we'll select snare drum, and let's do a hi-hat. And let's switch to hi-hat here. So we could just kind of remove. Okay, so So let's say, okay, we have this, and I want to put in, now as we go to play our different instruments, and let's say I want to drag like a sample in, we'll just go to home here, let's go to loops and samples and say, okay, I want, let's see if there's one shots in here. All right, so let's say I want this as a sample. All right, so we have drum synthesis and samples mixed together. So when we come over here, we can say, okay, I just want to come over here, let's adjust. And if we want more of a click, and we want to change our pitch, and we can change our envelope depth. And if we want to make it kind of like very 808-ish. All right, so, and now if we wanted to come over here to our snare, we could select this snare. And we'll just say, okay, let's just take our snare, let's adjust, you know. We want to add more noise into it. And if we have a sample, we could come over here and be able to adjust. Now, when we come over here, we could also have different pad effects. So if I want to put maybe a distortion on the, on the kick drum, we could come over here and say, okay, I want like a bit crusher. Let's go put a distortion on. And if we want to put filters, so let's say, okay, I'll just turn off some of the, and we could also just say, okay, when I go to my group, I can say, when I come here, let's just add reverb just on the snare, or if we want to add, let's say maybe a delay, and if we wanted to edit the delay, so let's say, okay, we're going to come here, let's make this more, so if we wanted to just adjust our delay here, so let's make it maybe 8-note delay. And now that we have kind of like maybe a kit that we like, we could at this point just go to the editor, and now we could just kind of program. Let me just solo a drum machine here. And let's say, and now we can just come right over here to the drum machine and say, okay, we can come to our kick. Let's go to the instrument, say, okay, we want less decay. And then if we want to again come over here to the group, we could adjust the level of our different sources. And let's say on this, we'll go to our pad effects. We want less, we'll select this, and we want less reverb. and go back to our pattern. So you could have just like kind of endless fun here. And let's say we'll take our snare, let's adjust. And let's say on this one, we could go input additional repeats on different hits. So we want to put a couple repeats. Or velocity variation. So let's say I want to come here and I'll select my velocity variance. So I want every other velocity to vary. So if we just want to solo our hi-hat, so you could just come over here. So we could just kind of very easily adjust our different elements. And let's say if I go back to my drum machine and I want to change, let's say the pitch, I could go to my instrument here. So let's say, okay, we go to our pitch. So I could right click here and let's add this to our pattern editor. So now when I go to the pattern editor, I could just say, let's go to the tuning, and I could just take and I could just tune just a hi-hat without affecting the tuning of the other pitches as well. So all sorts of creative stuff that you could do with the new drum machine. So you haven't checked it out, really just kind of check it out and play around with it. All right, so you see Fly-V says he's going to start using the rating out of 5 stars in loops and samples. And questions, what do you do with all of your used samples? So, one of the things that you could do in Media Bay, if you use a particular sample, I know, like I have clients, like Stevie Wonder's team is always like really careful never to use like a stock instrument preset, but they'll, but if you want to come over, one of the cool things that you could do in Media Bay, if you want to track like what sounds were used in a particular project, is if you go, let's say, to your media menu to Media Bay, you could just come over here. And if we go to our setup, and I think this is probably one of the built-in fields, we could go to our setup here, and then we could just come over here and choose like the song. So let's say project name. So if you've used a sample before, you could now go into the Media Bay and just say, okay, it's part of the project name. This was used in, Amos Moses. And then if you wanted to search for all sounds that were used in, so if you select a project, select all the files, you could tag it with the name of the project where it's going from, and that way you could see if that particular sound has been used and what project it was used in. All right, so we have Rob Schmedeke from Tarpon Springs. Ask, how can you detect which plugins are causing a MIDI keyboard to be delayed when you play it? I have to use the delay compensation option all the time. Thanks for your help. So if we go to your mix console, all right, and we'll just let's go to our setup. One of the things that you could do is actually see channel latency. So, and this will come up right above. So we'll see just our channel latency here. So we'll see like right above the channel settings here. So when we activate this, go to like the settings, you'll see the channel latency. So I can see that right here, this one, and this will show you the latency that's on every single track. So let's say on this particular audio track, I have some plugins, all right, and I don't know what's causing kind of the latency to be high. Okay, so now when we look at it, we can say, okay, you know, we could see in this column that this particular track, once we have the channel latency, and we could also see this on our channel inspector. So if we go to your setup sections, you can see kind of the latency show up right over here. So but once we do this, you could see kind of the latency that's on each track. And if you click in the little drop down menu, it'll show you exactly how much latency each plugin is causing in milliseconds and samples. So activate the channel latency function in the mix console or in the channel, and then you could, so we say we go to this plugin, the reference is causing 11 milliseconds of latency. So, and if there's multiple plugins that are causing it, then you could just easily define, just by looking in the channel latency view right here, what plugins are causing the latency, making you have to turn on the constrained delay compensation. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Rob. All right, so we see CB4 says, can you show how to process only a specific part of a recorded region? So I assume that this will be an audio file. Let me just... All right, I'll just drop a file in. Okay, so let's say I want to only do like an effect or process on just a selected range. So I'm going to just select the range. So if we have the combination tool, which I believe is the default mode, or just a range tool, we could select just a range. So let's say at this point I want to put on, you know, and then, you know, if you go to your audio menu, we could say, okay, I want to do processes. So let's say I want to reverse that. So we can see that the waveform is reversed, and I want to run it through different plugins. So we can say, okay, now I want to run this through my auto filter plugin, and this will be applied to just that selected range and not the other range. Let's apply another EQ. So let's say, okay, I want to go to my channel EQ or my studio EQ, and I want just like a very specific, let's adjust our Q, let's make it, so I want maybe like a radio voice or something like that. I could just come over here, and now that's been processed in the file. So you could just select a particular file. Now, if we have something with, let's say, a lot of plugins on it, so we saw earlier that we have our inserts. So if I wanted to take multiple files, I could just drag the inserts over. So let's say if I just come, so let me just select an event here. So like if I wanted to embed different inserts on a track here, then I could just take these inserts here and drag them over and apply all of the inserts. It doesn't do it to anywhere else, but it could do it just on a selection. Now this is part of what's called direct offline processing, and you could open and close it by hitting F7 on your computer keyboard. And if we wanted to remove, let's say, oh, it's all great except for this distortion, it was really bad, I could right click and just remove only that process, and it'll keep the other process. Or if I want the auto pan to come before the auto filter, I could just drag and drop and it will make those changes. And that's even after saving. We could go back because it always stores the original file and the processed file, and it will simply recalculate all of the necessary changes to make this particular order happen. And if you wanted to delete all and go right back to where you were, then right there. So if you just select the range with the range tool, and if you're in the combo mode, the bottom, when you work in the bottom, it's the object selection tool. When you go to the top, it's the range selection tool. And then at that point, you could hit F7 or just go to audio menu to processes or plugins, and whatever is selected gets processed and the other non-selected parts are unaffected. So let me know if that is helpful for you, CB4. All right, so we see Randy from Radar the Band says back after lunch, and apparently he went to Whataburger. So this will spark our debate over the best hamburger chain. All right. All right, so we have Mickey Praise Music, just says hello, so thanks for joining us. He's joining from Africa. All right, so we have Calico22 joining from Pennsylvania. Thanks for being part of our community, both to both of you. Let me know what part of Pennsylvania. I have lots of family in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. My mom grew up in Old Forge. My dad grew up in St. Clair. All right, Calico22 says, hi Greg, hope all is well. Running Nuendo 14 on a Mac. Can you please explain how I can ensure I'm print my hardware inserts when doing a mixdown? So all you have to do is if you have hardware inserts, we could just come right over here and we would configure them in our external effects in our audio connections. So you go to Studio menu to Audio Connections. And basically we want to come over, and as we have the inserts, we want to define where in our audio interface or converter the audio is going out to the unit and where it's going back into the audio interface. So we take interface out to hardware in, hardware out to interface in. We now come over to so we'll say, okay, we have that. We go to, when we add an external effect plugin, we can say, okay, I want to use my lexicon. We will have a little measure delay. So this will kind of measure the delay of that signal path and automatically compensate for any of the latency. And then when you go to export or mix down, you'll notice that when you use external effects, it always has to be mixed down in real time, because we can't process faster, because it's actually processing it in real time. So, and then as soon as you export, all of your external effects will be included. The big clue will be that you may get a warning message saying, because we're using hardware inserts or an external effects, that we're going to, the real time, the mix down will be in real time. We see Mark Lawson just says, oof, that bass drum, very Billie Eilish. I haven't really listened to any of her stuff. Probably missing out. And Fly V just says, nice breakdown of custom drums, Greg. So you're welcome. All right, wonderful to see Balsa checking in from Montenegro. All right, so we see, hi Greg, greetings from Montenegro. It says, when dragging audio on the chord track, besides the chord names, does it reveal the voicings of those chords? So generally it's not going to reveal the voicings, and, voicing, sometimes with, if you have, because much of the audio that you drag over, so let's just come over here. We'll shut it in. It's a great feature if you haven't seen this. Alright, so I can add a chord track. Let's import an audio file. Alright, so let's say I want to take this. So what we can do is just simply, like, this has piano, it has guitar, could have string pads, and these could all be playing the same chord but different voicings. So when we drag it, it's just going to give us the chords, but it won't necessarily indicate the chord voicings. So we could just kind of come over here and have all of our chords laid out for you, but, different voicings on, because many times, you might have two guitars and the guitars are playing different voicings. So it's not going to indicate the voicings, but rather kind of the fundamental chord. And then the musicians, when they see the chord analysis, they can figure out the chord voicings that they want to use. Okay. All right, so we see Mark Lawson says that's cool. Thanks, Greg. So welcome. All right, Tim K says new drum machine has so many amazing functions to explore. All right, so Ricky Terra says in Dolby Atmos session after 10-bed track, stereo object track that is 11 and 12 renders all audio in a multi-output render for stems of that object track. Please forward to tech team. Okay, so I'll pass that on. Let me just. Yeah, okay, I'll play around with that and pass it on. All right, wonderful to see David. David Reuter checking in with Kristen Parisi from Nashville, USA, and Big Tent Productions. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you're well. Enjoy seeing all your Facebook pictures of doing your rainbow trout fishing. All right, so we see from Mark Lawson says, what about adding a real drum that's been mic'd up, say snare, hi-hat, or bass drum? Can that be added to the drum machine to be sampled? All right, so let me just come over here. So say I got real drums, so this. Okay, so let's say I want to take, like I have 3 drums here. All right, so what I could do is I could take these 3 drums kind of right here, and let me just kind of zoom in. We'll say, take my snap off. All right, so say I want to take those 3, and so if I want to just come right over here, let's do a quick render in place. All right, and let me make sure I don't have those selected. Those armed, sorry. So I'm layering 3, so we'll just say, okay, so this one sample here is going to be our 3 kick drums. So if we want to go to our drum machine, that we could just open this up here. I think we could just drag and drop right onto a pad. Then we could have all 3 of our kick drums labeled. So, or if we have a groove agent, we could also, if we wanted to take like multiple kicks in groove agent, I could just come right over here. Let's take these in. Groove agent is a built-in instrument, so add an instrument track, which is a sampling drum machine. You get Groove Agent SE, and now I could drag and drop like 3 kick drums to a single pad. Let me just move this up so we can see it a little better. And here we could have these automatically kind of switch by velocities, or if I want to just have these all layered so that we could see all 3 of our different samples, and we could choose kind of different, we could trim kind of the start times of each of them. And we could have up to 32 different kicks that are layered together just like that. So if you want to use the drum machine, you could make your own kits very easily, just kind of drag and drop from a recording directly into the drum machine or into Groove Agent. Or if you have Halligan, you could do that as well. All right, so FlyV says, I have instruments that sometimes have notes played getting stuck. What can I do to eliminate this? Just disabling, then enabling again doesn't fix the hold for very long. So, you know, if you have instruments that you notice are kind of frequently getting stuck, it could be a result of maybe another MIDI message that's causing it. So what I would do first is just to come over and let's say, most of us are very comfortable with kind of like the graphic piano roll editor. What I would do if you notice like one particular instrument is getting stuck a lot is come over, go to the MIDI, and if we wanted to kind of see this under what I often will refer to as kind of like a microscope vision, a microscope mode. So when we come over, we could go into what we call the list editor. So sometimes when you're doing stuff like this, you may notice that, for instance, I'll just take, let's say I have this part here, and my keyboard controller has aftertouch on it. So let's say I'm going to just record, and I'm going to press down on the keys. All right, so when I look at my notes here, it seems like it's a pretty straightforward part. So we say, okay, looks pretty straightforward. But now when I look at it in the list editor, we can see, oh, there's all this aftertouch messages. So make sure that there's no kind of unexpected MIDI messages that your controller is transmitting. So for instance, if I wanted to get rid of all of this aftertouch, we can make sure that we have our filters on here. So we see filters. And then I could say we want to focus on the event type. And we can say, okay, here's all of my aftertouch. I didn't intend this to all be there. And I'm going to select all and delete. Hit my delete key, and now we could switch back to no focus, and now it's only the notes that are in there. So make sure that there's no kind of unexpected MIDI controllers that your MIDI controller may have been transmitting inadvertently, unexpectedly. Also, if you get stuck MIDI notes, one of the things that you could do is just come over and just hit MIDI and just hit reset, and that will send an all notes off message basically to every channel, every port, on every pitch. So if you have a stuck note, you can just go to MIDI and reset, but check to make sure it's not like, like I had someone that had a montage keyboard, and they didn't realize that for every note they were playing, because they kind of held the keys down, that it was sending gobs and gobs of MIDI data that was affecting the performance of their montage and how it was reacting, because it couldn't handle that much aftertouch on playback. Okay. Okay, Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, so we see Calico Tony too. Just says he's from Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Yeah, I have a cousin lives in Lake Wallenpaupack in the Poconos there. All right. So it says, his question is, do I select stereo out as the only option in the export menu? So it depends on what you want to export. So if you want to, I have my project here and I want to make my stereo mix of the project. At that point, we could just choose the stereo out. If we wanted to do like a batch export where we wanted to create like equal length audio files of every single element that's in the project, then if we select multiple, I can say, okay, I want each of the instrument tracks and I want them like audio from the beginning to the end, so that anyone using any multi-track audio environment can drag and drop and start all the files at the same time and have my project kind of play back. And we could choose if we want these to be interleaved, if we want them to have effects or not, and what level of effects. So if I just want no effects, I want the inserts in the channel strip, I want them to be dry, I want them to include descend or the master effects. We could have different levels. But if you're doing just a simple mix down, like a stereo mix of all of your different elements, just choosing the stereo out would be fine for your selection there. Okay, so we see from Val, just ask what's the difference between append clip names and parts get track names. Okay, so let's come over here. So let's say, I think this is in the preferences or settings. So let me just see if it's under just a quick look for this. I think it's in the preferences here. Okay, so there's the parts get track names. All right, so let's say if I go to a track here that's called Hamburg Calling and I create an event, so this would automatically get that particular name carried over. So I think that is what that, and let's say if we have a clip, let me just, we'll come here. So let's say if we take just, so we have an audio event here. So maybe Val, if you could just let me know like where in the program, if you could guide me a little bit on where in the program this is, the append clip names to event names. So I think that now we could have, if we, like, I'm not sure if it's the region name here. So let's say if we take this, let's take this particular file here and we select a region. So I will come over here. Let's go to regions and let's make a region name. So let me see if this is. Okay, and now if we give this a region name, we'll say a ho for a region name. So now we could have a region name, we could have a part name, or like the audio file and the track name. So we could have kind of multiple ones, but if you could maybe like tell me exactly what part of the program you're in, I could probably give you a better answer than that. All right, Rob Schmidtke asks, is a second question, Greg. If I see that an instrument has key switches, however they do not appear in the key editor screen as an option expression map, how do I activate them in the key editor? Okay, so so if we have a particular instrument, so let's say, okay, I'm here with this instrument, and we open the instrument, I could see that we have key switches. All right, so if we come here, we could. So we need to have an expression map for it to show. So right now, when we double click on the event, we can see that the inspector changes to the editor inspector, and we could go to our expression map setup. So If it is a Hallian-based instrument, what you could do is just come over here and choose to import key switches. All right, and now when we come over, so let's say if we have no key switches here, and I'll just make this full screen so it's a little easier to see. All right, so we say, okay, let's go to our articulations and dynamics. So I don't see any, but when we go to the expression map and we say import the key switches, or I select, now we could see these particular events. Now, if it's not a Hallian-based instrument, there could be a good chance that someone has made an expression map for it already. But you could also make one just by going to your MIDI menu, and we choose the expression map setup. And then you may have to just kind of click here, and we want to add a map. And then at this point, we could choose, okay, we want this to be key switches. What does this key switch do? What's the name of it? Do we want it to be an attribute or direction? And then once an expression map has been assigned or loaded up for a particular track, then it will automatically show all of the expression, all of your dynamics here. So when we don't have an expression map loaded in the track, so again from the expression map, and if you're on the main project window, if you're like, I don't see the expression map, select the MIDI event. And if you double click, that will make it the inspector for the MIDI key editor. And then you could just switch to the expression map, and then it will be available for you to access and use right there. All right, John Costigan asks, hi Greg, can you give me some wisdom on stacking drum samples in Groove Agent SE or Groove Agent by Velocity? Any best velocity to cross over to next louder drum? And it says, thanks for everything. All right, so let's... All right, so I'll just go ahead and cut the kit. All right, so usually, like if we come over, let's get to my media menu, I'll go to favorites. So let's say I have a number of snare drum samples here. Sorry, just had to sneeze. All right, so I'm going to select these snare drum samples. All right, now when I take these snare drum samples, and I drag them all to one pad, so we'll just see where we're going to do on one single pad. So right now what it does, I have, looks like 8 different samples. It will just divide the velocities according to, so when I come over here, I hit it very soft, and as I kind of go up, so it will kind of take, you know, we have 128 velocity levels, 0 to 127. And if we look at this as it, so we'll see this is 0 to 15, 16 through 31. So it will automatically spread these across depending upon the number of samples. So that will set kind of an equitable, even distribution between that. So if we want to adjust it, like let's say your drummer comes over and is like, oh, I really want to hit it this hard to still be playing this sample in the middle, you could just come right over here and adjust the velocity level graphically. So you can say, okay, I want a very small velocity range for that, or I want this velocity range to be much larger. Or maybe in the bottom, I want these to be more subtle, and you could adjust. It's always fine to start off with kind of like an even distribution and say, okay, this is where, and, if you get a drummer that's coming over and they're like super picky and they want to spend most of their time in the top 2 velocities, we could just kind of come over here and adjust accordingly if this is where like their money snare hits are. But, by default, it will just do that, do everything, and split it equally. So if I just come over, let me just cut the pad here. And if I do 4 notes instead, so say I select 4 or 5, it will just, again, automatically split those evenly. So now we could just come over. And that's not a bad place to start at all. All right, so see, thanks Val for the clarification. It says it's under preferences, editing, and preferences, event display, audio. Okay, so I think under the editing, just like we did with the Hamburg calling, that when we create events with this particular preference on, so say under editing, that the parts get track names. So as we record events, it will automatically, these will, carry the name over from the track. Let's look at the other preference. Again, thanks for the clarification, Val. All right. I think it's under event display audio. Append clip to event name. Okay. Sorry, let me get my monitoring computer back up here. Bear with me just a moment. Okay. Okay, so let's see if we create kind of a clip name here. So let's see if it's with the regions. All right, bear with me just a second. I'm just going to. All right, so I may have to. All right, let me just do a quick search, see if I can figure it out. see if I can get this sorted out for you. Sorry about this. All right, so let's see if we come over, I'm going to just record something here. Okay. We'll just create audio track and let's record. All right, so let's say if we come here, so maybe if we change the description name, all right, so if we change the description name, we could do that, and let's see if that is, that changes with that preference. So we turn that off. Let's do a new description. All right, so what it's going to do, sorry for, all right, so with that, so if I change my description here, we can see that we have the original audio file name, and we look at the name of the event. So I'm just going to type in some gibberish, and now the name of the event is gone. But if we come over here to the settings, and we say append the clip name to the event name, so we'll say apply, we'll see that the 4202 will still be there, and then when we get to our description, we add our gibberish, that we still see the original file name in addition, and the clip name, which is from the description field, is automatically appended to the original file name that we see in a parenthesis there. Sorry, it took me a while to figure it out. Thanks for your question, Val. All right, from Mel James, he asks, in the audio performance monitor, I keep getting overloads or peaks when not too much is happening on the tracks. Any idea what could be causing this? Process buffer is set to 512 samples. Okay, so it could be, like, even if there's not much happening on a particular track, or you don't have seemingly a lot of tracks. Let me see, I may have a project that has this. To showcase this. Okay, so right now I have all of these tracks, and let's look at just my inserts on this particular. Okay, so each of these tracks has one insert, and I chose kind of this one multi-tap delay that has basically like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 9 different effects in just this one instance of this plugin. So if we look at, so let's say we have 8 tracks. And these 8 tracks have one plugin each on it. So let's open up our audio performance meter. I wish my Mac OS wouldn't change that, but let's look at our audio performance monitor. So we play 8 tracks. We don't really have so much of an issue. Now if I take, so I'm going to disable these particular tracks. So I'm going to disable these tracks so they're not taking any memory or CPU usage. I'm going to enable this track. All right, now this track has 8. So the same number of plugins, but all of them are on one track. So how DAWs work, and every DAW works this way, is that when we're processing one track and all of the plugins are going to be kind of serial in nature, meaning that like this plugin goes into this plugin, into this, etc. So that when we're doing kind of one task, all of this is going to only utilize one processor core. So before, when we had 8 tracks with one of the plugins on it, it was utilizing, each of these could be spread across different processing cores. But now that all of the same number of plugins on a single track, let's look at the audio performance meter. So you see that we have problems, and it's not because of like CPU distribution. We can't necessarily, like split these. These processes are serial in nature, and as we do this, that could only utilize one CPU core. So depending on how everything is laid out in your project, so one track with like 8 plugins, that could make my, state-of-the-art M4 Mac with 64 gigs of RAM look very suspicious. So, but if I come over here and I select the same number of tracks, and let's go ahead and we'll toggle we'll just come over here, we'll enable the selected tracks. Now, it could also be a virtual instrument if you have one instrument. So now if we come over here and we play back kind of our 8 tracks, and I'll disable this track with the 8, it has no problem playing it. It's the same number of plugins, but it's a matter of how those plugins are going to be utilized, of how it could distribute across different CPU cores. Now, as I mentioned before, if you have a virtual instrument open, most virtual instruments will work kind of in the same manner, where we could say, okay, we add a virtual instrument. So let's say we do something like Hallian Sonic-ish. So as we come over here, we could see that if I had one instance in a multi-timbral instrument, that this one instrument is only going to be utilizing one CPU core. And that's how the vast majority of instruments work. In Hallian, it could be a little smarter than the average bear, and we could actually come over here and utilize multiple CPU cores within the instrument, but that's pretty much an exception. Most instruments won't allow for multi-core use. So depending on how your system is set up, maybe you duplicate a track, and then one track you run 4 plugins, the next track you run another 4 plugins, and maybe get kind of a similar sound. So, depending on how the nature of how DAWs work and just computer processing, that one thread has to stay on one processing core. So that one function, when it's going in serial, if you have multiple You know, if you have 8 inserts on one track, that could kill your CPU, but one insert, the same insert across multiple tracks, may not tax it as much. So you may have to kind of, depending on your project, you may have to kind of allocate the plugin routings and the plugin placement to take advantage of to get more and improved multi-core usage and performance, and which will improve your audio performance. All right. I see Jazz Dudes is recommending the latency monitor, Latency Mon, which is a great analysis tool to check out, see if you have any components that could be causing issues as well. So sometimes video cards, network cards can interrupt like real-time audio performance and could cause increased audio performance unnecessarily. All right. All right, let me go to a question that was mailed in. All right, so we had a question, how to set up different instruments to play in zones for live performance. Okay. Let me see if this one where I kind of got this started now. Okay, so let's say we want to do live performance and we want to kind of have clever splits. I'll just start fresh. And we want to like go out and just play the keyboards and have different instruments in different zones on our keyboard. So let's say I want it to have a tenor saxophone here. All right, let me just. All right, so we want to have like a tenor saxophone as kind of a lead instrument. So we'll call this sax. Let's add a piano. So let's say we want to do like an etude piano. And let me just come over here. Okay, and let's add a bass part. All right, so what we want to do is, if we're imagining our piano keyboard, maybe I want the bottom octave to be a bass. I want the middle octaves here to be like 2 octaves of piano, and the upper octave to be just saxophone. So I want to be able to split the zones, like what keys are playing what instrument, so that they're not all layered together. And let's make this a little intelligent. So let's say the piano, and we're going to utilize under the routing what's called an input transformer. So we will come over here, let's activate our track, and when we do this, we want to then open the panel and say, I want to, at this point, we're going to filter notes. So we're going to click on insert. So we're going to say notes, and we want to filter out notes, and we'll say our subtype, because we're going to do this based on pitch. And we'll say that's outside of the range, and I'm going to choose, and I will just hit the keys on my controller keyboard. Okay. So now when we do this, I'm only going to we're going to filter out notes that are outside of this particular range. So now, okay, and let's say on this, maybe I want to also, on my piano, pitch bend may make sense on the saxophone part, but it may not make sense on the like on the saxophone. So on my piano part here, we're going to also say we want to filter out, and we'll say type is equal to pitch bend. So now when I select my piano part here, if we have this activated, let me make sure. So I'll come over here. So my pitch bend isn't going to work, and let's look at this. So we're going to filter notes outside of range. So now when I press keys on my virtual keyboard, just so we could see this, and we move up an octave here, these keys are being filtered out. All right, so let's set our range for our bass. So I want the bass to be, and we're looking at the instrument, I want the bass to be like the bottom octave, let's say from this C to that C. So we're going to go to the track inspector for our bass part. And again, we will come here to the channel inspector. And we'll open up the panel. And now what we want to do is to filter. And we'll say notes. And we'll say our subtype. So we're going to say we're going to filter out notes outside of this range. And then I will just hit the MIDI controller that automatically puts the note in. So let's say, okay, now I want it to go from C1 to B1. So now when I play the bass, and if I have my piano turned on as I play, and let's say I want my saxophone, and also for my bass, I want to filter pitch bend. So I will add a second, and we could save these as presets, but now I'm going to filter, and we'll say we want to type is equal to pitch bend. Now let's go to our saxophone, and we'll go to its input transformer. And let's say also in the bass, like I may want to use like sustain pedal. But maybe I don't want sustain pedal on bass. So we could filter out sustain pedal on bass. But let's go to set our saxophone range. Come to our input transformer. Say we'll go to track. We'll open up the panel. And here we want to, again, filter pitches. So we'll say, let's say we want to filter notes that are outside And we'll say the subtype to pitch is outside of the range. And here we'll say C4 to C5. Okay, so now when I play my saxophone, so I'm going to have my octave. I can, if I have my piano here, and then if I have my bass as I go down the keys. But let's say I don't want the saxophone to actually be at the same pitch just because I'm playing it high on the keyboard. We could see, and let me just open this up just so we could visualize it a little bit. So we look at our keyboard and we say our low notes here. But I want the saxophone to not play at that pitch, but I want those pitches. So on my saxophone part, what I could do is come over here and let's go to the MIDI modifiers, and I'm just going to say let's transpose down an octave. So now when I play, so these notes are playing from the same keys, but they're actually down an octave. So, and at this point, I also want to say I don't want the sustain pedal from the piano to be affecting the saxophone. So again, we could go to the routing. We'll come over here. Let's get to the panel, and we want to filter out the sustain. So we'll come here, choose filter, insert, say our vent type is set to program change, and we want our subtype to be equal sorry, not to program. Okay, we'll say type let's say our subtype all right, so we want this to be, I'm sorry, controller, and then our MIDI controller we want to be 64, which would be our sustain pedal. All right, so now that we have this kind of set up, and we could save this as a track archive if we wanted to. When we play, I can just come over here and see kind of how everything is laid out. So let's see if we want to look at it on our so we could filter out. So I have my piano in kind of the middle part. Let's open up maybe just a piano in editor so we could see the pitches here. Sorry. So we're to get our pitches from the side here as we come over, so we can see what pitch is being played here. So one, so this way we could split which notes are actually being sent to the different instruments, so that I could play multiple instruments on different zones from one keyboard, especially kind of for live use. So again, the trick is to come over, go to the input transformer, and we want to say filter notes, and we want to filter out notes that are outside of the range. So these are the notes that we want on this particular track. Then it's going to filter out every note that's not there. So I could have my bass parts, my piano, and my saxophone all kind of split from one keyboard setup, so I could play individual notes on different tracks and have it all split, and also have the controllers so that my sustain pedal isn't affecting my bass or the saxophone, and I can have pitch bend only on the saxophone but not piano or the bass. So a couple cool things that you could do with the input transformer there. All right, let me jump back to some of the live questions. See if we have some more questions. All right. All right, so see, Jazz DJ says, why not should keyboard range inside a Hallian Sonic? So we may not. So if we wanted to see this, so it's only going to show the keyboard range of the particular instrument. So this way I don't see the saxophone, but if we come over and we open up, let's say our saxophone here, you see right there, that's a split point. And then if we want to look at our piano instrument, as we come over here, so as we play higher, we see that that's being filtered out. Then we look at the bass instrument. So that's can help you with get an idea. So that's why we kind of couldn't show it all on one particular instrument at once. So all right, we see Michael Teams taking his wife Sylvia to the eye doctor. You'll see us all on Friday. Hope she has a good eye appointment. My wife had an eye appointment this morning. All right, see Graham Witcher on from Oxford, England. All right, let's go to the next question that was mailed in. All right. Question is, hi Greg, can I run a project from a USB stick without getting dropouts, or must I copy the project to the C drive? So I'm wondering, does Cubase download all WAV files from a USB stick or a slow HDD and store them in RAM, and then there's no access to the USB HDD stick? That would destroy the real-time handling. So you could definitely do it. I would say if you had it could really depend, and there's a difference in the speeds of different USB sticks. So you could have a super fast USB drive, and have projects play directly off of it. But if it's connected to a slow USB 2.0 port, you might be, it could be the port connection may not handle the connection. If you hook it up into an unpowered hub, then that may throttle the playback. I think that there's a lot of USB flash drives that you could play back a number of audio tracks from. When you play back the initial, very, very initial attack, and we could look at this when we go to your studio setup. I think if we come over here, we can see disk preload. So that will be kind of, I think, loaded into RAM before it plays. And we see this under the advanced options, the disk preload. So the very first second or two of the audio file may be loaded into RAM, but it's not going to play back from RAM even like a fairly small project could, take away all of your computer's memory. But for the most part, I would say if you got a USB 3.1, flash drive, a USB drive, and it's connected into like a USB 3 or 3.1 port, that you should be able to play back a number of audio tracks from it. You could copy it to an internal or external drive, but you should be able, they've come, kind of light years from when they were first introduced, 20, 25 years ago. So, there's some people that, will buy some people are buying like hard drives that are basically like a micro SD card inside of a drive enclosure. So some of them are super fast. So you could definitely, play back projects from it. If you're doing a project with 300 audio tracks, you might run into issues, especially when you're sharing USB resources with an audio interface and maybe a monitor, and a MIDI device, but a lot of them you can play back a good number of audio tracks from. All right. Let me just look, see if we have any live questions. All right. All right, and we see from Jazz Dude says used a range inside of Halligan Sonic 7. So the original question was kind of using other devices. If you are smart enough to be running everything inside of Halligan Sonic 7, I'll show another way. So this method would work for any VST instrument, but if I come over, and let's say I have my electric bass here, and I want to just come over and say, okay, let's do our tenor sax. So when we come here, we could go to the MIDI page, and if we wanted to set up our different ranges here, we can say, okay, I want my piano to start, to be in this particular range. So let's say C1 through C4. And then I want my saxophone or my bass to be in this range. And my saxophone to be in this range. So, and this is a great feature of Halligan Sonic, and then we could choose to transpose here as necessary. So if we wanted this to be -12, we could do that here. But if you aren't doing everything in kind of a Halligan Sonic or Halligan environment, that's when you could use the input transformer. But if you're using Steinberg instruments, this person that mailed a question in was using different instruments, but you could do this very easily right here. All right. All right, let's get to the next question that was mailed in. All right, it says, Dear Greg, can you tell me why none of the Steinberg effects are listed when I want to use them in spectrolators as an ARA extension in Nuendo 14? So if we're running, when we run so the plugins that come with Cubase are kind of tied to Cubase. And I know it seems silly because Spectralayers is a Steinberg program as well, but let's come here and just say, if we have an audio we'll make an audio track. We'll just drag a loop over to it. And we go to access it directly inside of spectral layers. We could just come over. So we'll just go to our extensions. So now when we want to run it through like our VST 3 effects, as we do this, you'll notice that the Steinberg plugins, just like the included Nuendo 14, Cubase 14 plugins, don't show up in other VST hosts. So like when I come here, you may notice that since I have all built-in plugins, that none of the built-in plugins will show up. I know it can seem silly that the plugins, we could think of them as VST3 plugins that are tied directly to Cubase. So even if we wanted to use those plugins in like VST Connect for remote recording, they're going to be tied directly to Cubase and not accessible to other VST hosts, whether it's a Steinberg application or not. So that's why you don't see the VST3 plugins kind of in that come with Cubase and other programs, and that unfortunately falls into spectral layers as well. Okay, another question. Is it best to have your project file and all audio files on separate SSD drive and not on the same drive as your Nuendo program, or doesn't it really matter nowadays? So it used to be, like a lot of people that have been working with audio and computers would often have like a system drive and then maybe a high performance audio drive. Going back years, it would be like a SCSI drive would offer kind of better performance than IDE for a while. And you could daisy chain multiple SCSI devices, like, you had different SCSI channels, like 6 or 7 channels. And you could kind of daisy chain SCSI devices kind of like in a network. So people that have been doing audio for a long time tend to always want to split up resources because we had to. I don't think it is necessary. So everything I'm doing is on a single drive for my laptop that I'm using for the live streams. So I don't think it's necessary now. But kind of old habits can stick around for a while. So I still know people that, like I have my audio and virtual instruments and my applications on separate drives on my personal computer. On the computer I'm using for the live streams is Mac M4 laptop. I'm just using one drive for everything. And maybe if I was doing, 10,000 tracks, I might notice, or 1,000 tracks, you could be running into, potential like roadblocks. But I think for most normal projects, you could do everything on a single drive without any consequence. It can make a difference, like if you have your samples and if you upgrade your computer, a lot of people may have their samples on a particular drive, and instead of having to go through and recopy, like 2 terabytes, 3 terabytes of samples from computer A to computer B, that they may just move that drive over. So there's a lot of people that do that as well, so they don't have to reinstall lots and lots of content from lots and lots of different suppliers and worry about losing content that could be used in a particular project. All right. All right, so we see a question from Daniela Giacchio. Says, how do you render an amp simulator and keep the original fader setting on the new rendered track? Okay, so let's say Just import. All right, so let me. Okay, so I will come over here. All right, so let's say I want to take this, and we have. All right, so I have my VST amp rack here. All right, so I'm not sure if you want to render the effect on it. If I come here, let's say, so we have, this is just kind of, we'll listen to just the dry guitar. Okay, and now with the amp simulator on. All right, so if we want, and let's say our fader is down here, so let's go to our render settings. So if we, let's say if we had like a number of tracks that we wanted to kind of consolidate the particular, so I wanted to take these two tracks here, and we could say, okay, when I go to render in place, we could say, let's get to our render settings. And then we could choose to do dry. And let's say I want to combine these two events as one single event. And I choose dry, transfer the channel settings. So when I do that, we're going to render and basically combine those two clips, and it's copied over the settings. So my plugins are still the same here. Now we can see that the volume fader is at the same position between the original track and our rendered track. And the EQs, the plugins are identical, but basically what it's done, it's consolidated multiple events into a single event. Now, if we do our render in place and we choose to include, let's say the channel settings would include the inserts and sends. When I click on render, the volume of this is applied to the file. So we can see that the amplitude here, when we look at these two tracks, that we can see higher amplitude in the top track than the bottom track. So these are the same size, and what's happened is the volume attenuation, the difference that we see that this track is louder than this track, is just because of the fader position. So the fader position is baked into the file so that it's rendered out at the same volume level. So when we switch between these two, we notice that they're going to be outputting the same level. It's just that the attenuation of the volume has been applied into the track. So if you're embedding the processing in the render in place, we can just come over here and that will take into account the fader position. And so that way when you render the files as, let's say, different stems, it's going to be the same exact volume with everything set at 0 dB, and the volume attenuation is automatically copied over. And that will be the case for the channel settings, the complete signal path, or we could just say our complete signal path here. Now, another method to maybe do this would be to do an offline processing. So let's say if I go to my processes here, so I'll go to my direct offline processing, and if I drag my inserts over to the file, so let's say I'll do this on the correct file here. So, yep, this is my rhythm guitar. So let's. And then we could apply those particular effects to the guitar. Let me just say, okay, we'll come here. Let's give it a name. And now when we select the particular event, so let me just select the event and I could just drag. And now those two files have been rendered. And when we keep the track volume the same, we can see the difference in the gain. So when you see like an attenuation of the fader or the fader changing volume, that's because it's accommodating all of the gain changes that are introduced in the channel and the processing to the particular file. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Daniel. All right, great to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. All right, we see Bratman Studio. All right, and Rick asks, on Halion 7 sounds, the keys at the bottom, depending on patch, will be different colors. What does that designate? Different loops or... Okay, so let's open up a particular file here. All right, so often those could differentiate like different key switches. So when we go to, let's say, our piano part here, or our cello part. So when we look at a particular instrument, we could see that these are notes that are within the range of the instrument. These notes that are gray are out of range. Now, if we want to change particular sounds or samples that will switch articulations, we could hit these key switches. So now this would indicate different colors, that we could have different types of and if we wanted to say, okay, let's do tremolo, or if you wanted to do, legato, so, you have sustained vibrato. So if we come over here, we could just say, okay, let's just select this and versus pizzicato. So these would often just come right over there, and these often indicate that if we see white, the white color indicates that that's kind of the playable range of the instrument, and often these other keys are indicating that they are something that changes the sound, like switching to different articulations on like orchestral instruments is pretty typical. So that's what the different colors indicate. So, and this could be even if we go to if you look at like different instruments with like a VX extension, so if you just come over here, type in VX, we could say, okay, I want to come over here to brass section. So you may notice that as we do this, let me just come over here. So we could say, okay, I want to go to my brass. And as we click on different windows here, we could have different states of the instrument. So it could be softer, brighter, falls. So those different, when you see like VX, we'll often see different types. So we go to strings, and so short, and often if you hover, that will give you an idea, oh, this is tremolo. So So you could just come over here and, just kind of hover over, and often that will give you an idea exactly what that key switch is utilizing and doing for the sound. So, and often, most of the, people take a lot of time to give you these options. Take advantage of them because it's what makes the instrument unique. All right. All right, let me get back to questions. All right. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. All right, so we have a question from CB4. I think we did this a little earlier, but I'll show it again. Can you show how to process a specific part of a region? Okay. All right, so let's say if we come over here, let's say we have this vocal file.
Remember.
All right, let me just not take it out of punch in, punch out. All right. Okay, so as we're coming over here, so let's say we have this, and let me just. Okay, so let's say we have this region
day
here.
After, day after.
And we'll listen to this region.
A new day.
So let's say on this little that where we want to put a delay on it. So I'm going to select that region with the range tool. So, and you could have the range tool selected independently and just kind of drag across. If you're in kind of the combined selection tool, if you just select the if you go to the top area, you'll see it kind of turn into almost like a little, you see the tool will change as we navigate from the top to the bottom. And now at this point, what I want to do is we could go to, if you wanted to go to your audio to direct offline processing, we could add a plugin. So let's just add like a ping pong delay. Let's make it like a quarter note delay. And now when we play, this won't have effects on it.
Day after.
And we come over here, this part will have. And so let's say we listen to that.
A new day.
And if we wanted to put like a tail on it as well, we could just kind of say, okay, we want to extend our processing time here. So, and so let's say this one, I want to have a reverb. So we could just come over here. Let's add a plugin and say, okay, let's put a RoomWorks SE reverb on it. So this will be dry.
A new day.
And now we listen to this. This will have the reverb.
Remember me. All is love.
And this we could just add.
Are we there yet? I'm too
Let's say we'll do like a flanger on that region.
Life. All is love. Are we there yet?
So this way we could have different regions that will have different processing.
Day after.
So dry, we'll add our delay, dry reverb, dry flanger.
A new day.
Now this should be the reverb, kind of the.
Remember me.
And then dry, and then a flanger.
All is love. we there yet?
So let me know if that makes sense for you, CB4. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Mark Lawson. All right, it just says, is there more demand from TV, film, and music producers to record in 32-bit float? What is this mainly used for? So we could think of, I would say there may not be as much of a demand in film and post because everything is pretty much 24-bit 48K. But as we are, but especially in music, and the reason that we have kind of 32-bit floating point precision is because most of the audio is recorded at 24-bit. If we're to make an analogy of kind of 24-bit, if we had, let's say, like for a long time, many systems were 24-bit fixed point because that's what the kind of like hardware DSPs were on many systems. So if you record a 24-bit audio, like a 24-bit integer audio file, and at that point, if we say, okay, we want to come over here, we're going to add effects, we're going to add, compression, we need to add like tape saturation, we run it through a limiter. So if we're already kind of at the maximum resolution of the audio file at 24-bit where it's captured, when we add these other processes in, what we can do is we need to, if we're kind of at the maximum resolution already, what kind of legacy systems would do, and legacy not for that long ago, is they would just kind of truncate the original recording to accommodate the additional information that was needed to be added to the audio files to accommodate all this extra processing. So if you were to make an analogy of, okay, I go on vacation and my suitcase is completely packed, and then I buy stuff while I'm on vacation. Like with a 24-bit fixed point, it's like your suitcase doesn't expand. You're at the maximum resolution. So with 32-bit floating point, it's kind of like an expansion suitcase that, okay, I bought a sweater, I bought this, I bought a gift for the person watching my pet, I bought this for my mom, I bought this for my brother, and I need to fit all those new contents from my vacation into the suitcase. So instead of being a 24-bit suitcase, it could be a 32-bit floating point suitcase that could accommodate the processing or the extra items that we bought and want to take home into the original audio file. So most music, and it used to be, like a lot of programs couldn't actually read a 32-bit floating point file. Steinberg was like one of the first companies that actually offered that. It's more common now, and especially if you're doing mastering, like a mastering engineer will probably always want to have a 32-bit file. Now, a lot of audio may be captured in 32-bit floating point, especially in post. So let's take a look at why you may want to do like one of the advantages of 32-bit floating point, because it gives you significantly more headroom to work with. So let's say you're like doing audio recording in a field. Most of the time what could happen is, if you clip, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go to my project settings, and we're going to say our bit depth for recording is 32-bit floating point. Okay, so I want to, let me just add, let's just find a quick drum loop. Okay, so I'm going to take this drum loop here and I'm going to route it to a group. All right, and then I'm going to add another audio track, and we're going to route from the group into the track. So if I come over here, we can kind of record and enable this track. It's going into the group. So let's say all right, so I want to create some clipping on this. So I'll turn the volume down, and I'm just going to add a ton of gain until it's distorting. So on my group, I want to come over, and we'll go to our pre-section, and we'll just add a bunch of gain. I'll just take this down. All right. All right, so I'm just going to add more gain from our group into the channel here. Okay, so the goal is to have this basically clip. Okay, so let's say this is going to be clipping. So I'm going to record this audio so that it's significantly clipping here. So we'll call this clipped audio. All right, so, and we're recording it at 32-bit floating point. So we'll come over here. All right. So we can see that we are significantly clipped. I'm going to switch now to 24-bit recording. And let's add an audio track, and we'll set the group. We'll call this 24-bit. Okay, so we will record again here. All right, so we see that we're like significantly clipping the audio. So when you look at the waveforms, like the transients of this audio, we can see that all of the audio transients here are on we'll look at our 24-bit file. We can see that all the transients are basically getting chopped off. Now let's look at, this is our 32-bit audio file. They're getting chopped off here, but when I grab my clip gain, so let's come over here and say, okay, we drag our clip gain down. Now as we drag the clip gain, we could see that with the 32-bit audio, that we could automatically kind of recover the transients that we don't recover with the 24-bit audio. So many like field recorders for post-production will allow you to get back the transients without clipping the audio. So that's another reason that people like 32-bit audio. So we're seeing it more and more, especially for mastering, for the audio capture, like on different like sound device portable recorders for film and TV. Those are often being recorded at 32-bit floating point, because if there was one word that clipped, you could just bring the gain down to adjust. All right. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we have Muflu Demis says, how can I ensure that the channel I select in the mixer is selected in the track at the same time? So generally it's always going to be a one-to-one parity between the channel selections. So let's say if we come over to this project here, And I'll revert this. So anytime that you select here, it's automatically, the channel selections will always be synced between the two programs, between the mix console and the lower zone for channel selection. If we are in, let's say, mixer 1 over here, so we could say that you want to sync the project in the mix console. I think that channel selections will always be synchronized regardless, just by default. So probably doesn't make sense to have so just by default those will always be synced, and you could come over here and synchronize like different visibility settings between mixers, but the channel selections are inherently always synced. All right, so we see from Bratman Studios, as Greg, great explanation of key switches. We'll have to try them now instead of thinking they are only the range limitation. Yeah, so a lot of keyboard controllers, I think the native instruments controllers will actually, the lights will illuminate to highlight different key switches that are available on different instruments. So that's why a lot of people that work with different sample libraries like that particular controller, because it could kind of highlight the available key switches. So generally the sample developers have worked hard and long to come up with all these different options, and a lot of people tend to just use the default sound and may load up the same thing and switch the sound, but it's so easy to kind of use key switches to change between the different samples. All right. So we see Mark Lawson just says, excellent, thanks. It's me again. So, all right. Let me jump. I think we may have another question or two that were mailed in. Okay, so we have a question. It says, I'm working on a documentary in Nuendo, and it is for a TV channel. The deliverables requires the files to be a 2.0 mix and a 5.1 mix. Unfortunately, they require the two mixes to be exported as one file only. Is there a way I can set up an 8-channel output and set the stereo version to channels 1 and 2 and the 5.1 version to channels 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then export as an 8-channel master during the post-production process? I will still need to be able to send to the director's separate stereo version and 5.1 version for him to have a listen to, so the 8-channel version is purely to deliver to the TV channel. Yeah, so I haven't seen many scenarios where that's the case, but let me just import, do a new project here. All right, so generally people try not to mix up like one file for stereo and 5.1, but if you had to do it interleaved, so let me just come over here. Let's get to my connections. I'm going to add a 5.1 out. Oh, sorry. Let me just. All right, so let me just, remove that bus. Let's add a 5.1 out. Okay, so I'm going to import All right, so let's say this is a 5.1 output here. All right. So we want this, when we go to our routing, we want this to go out of our 5.1 output bus. Okay, so when we open this up, we can see that we're going to have let's say our 5-channel interleaved. Let's make this, so we'll say this is 5.1. And we'll make this stereo. I think I have a stereo mix of this. Let me just. Okay, so let's say we have our stereo and our 5.1. So probably what I would do is, if I wanted these to be combined into a particular track, I may create a group. And let's make the group configuration as 7.1. Okay, so we want this to be routed maybe with the sends, or I guess we could just send this to our group, send this to our group, and then let's create an audio track. So I will do, just so we have a 5.1 in stereo, they're going to like an 8-channel group. And let's see what happens if we export audio mixdown and we say group 1. We'll insert this into the project. So we'll create a new audio track just so we could visualize, make sure. So we'll say export. And now we can see that this one audio file here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's just see if that's all right. So if we come here, let's see if this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, let me just make that group. We change the group to like an 8-channel. Okay, then we make a 7.1 output. So we'll come over here. Let's get to audio connections. Okay, let's make our group track, and we'll make this our 7.1 out for our configurations. Okay, we'll route both of these tracks to our group. And we'll choose this, we'll import, and then we'll see if it's an 8-channel interleaved file. All right, so now when we look at this file, we see your stereo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we could have your 8-channel interleave. So I don't know, many people that actually do that as a deliverable that I've heard of. Most of it is kind of like separate stereo and 5.1, but if you have to do it and they have the methodology to transfer that, create a 7.1 output, create a 7.1 group, route the stereo and a 5.1 to the 7.1 group, and then you could just render that and get an 8-channel interleaved file like so. All right, see if there's other questions here. All right, so we see Mark Lawson says, can Cubase be used for live music? So we have lots of people use Cubase for live performance. We also make a dedicated tool for that called VST Live. And, there's a lot of great uses for VST Live. You could take a Cubase project in, but, there's lots of people that use Cubase for live performance, like Hans Zimmer. He always calls it the 19th person in his band for all the Hans Zimmer live stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in Cubase as well, and people are switching different instruments, kind of like how I showed earlier. But people use it, but VST Live can do like really clever things for starting off different songs, being able to navigate, to have lyrics, have chord charts, all be playback directly through VST Live. So, all right, great to see Michael Pierce on from Grand Chapel Studios in England. All right, Mark Lawson says, if so, how's it best to set up each of the channels? I.e., do you add an EQ and a compressor to each channel? What would be the best way to do this? Okay, so if you want to assign like an EQ and compressor to every channel. So when we click on the E key, the edit channel settings, so here we're going to have a 4-band parametric EQ, meaning that we could set the gain, the amount of the frequency, and the amount of Q or cut, like how wide or narrow that EQ band is. So we could adjust 4 bands of EQ on every single channel. If you click over here to the channel strip, every channel comes with a noise gate. You have multiple types of compression. So if you want like standard compressor, tube compressor, or vintage compressor, you can see the same settings from your channel EQ here. You could have tools for a de-esser or an envelope shaper, kind of like a transient designer. If you want analog tape saturation and limiting, you could come over here and change the order. So every single channel, without having to instantiate like a plugin, you could have not only your 4 bands of EQ, you have high cut and low cut filters, as well as phase or polarity inversion that you could just click right there. In addition to 6 different processing stages, plus you could load up any plugin here as an insert. So lots of flexibility and very easy to add all of your processing as you see fit, very much like a large format analog console. Okay, so we see Muflu just says, as you said, it didn't work nice. Selected sync selection project window and mix console option into preferences. So let's go ahead and show that just for the channel selection between the mixer and the project. So let's see if it's under editing, see if it's in here. Might be under project and mix console to sync selection. So yeah, so if you run into that issue where it's not syncing, or it's being independent, so now we could select It looks like even there it's kind of working as expected. So, but the sync selection, so if we undo that, now we have independent settings, but again, come over here. So thanks for pointing it out, Muflu. So just that preference under editing, project, and mix console sync selection. Okay. All right, I think we had one more question that was mailed in. Let's get to that. All right, and this is from Uno Memento. So I may have to see the project on this Uno. I wasn't able to kind of reproduce it, so and it was hard to see what the project routing is. But let's see if we could take a stab at it. Says when I mute a track, and let me just open up a different project here. Okay. So say we have large project here. Okay, so let's say it says when I mute a track, in this case, the brass track also goes to mute, and it doesn't go to mute even though I press the mute button on the track. All right, so let's say if I mute a track here, and I'll just take off automation. So one, see if automation is enabled. All right. It says now when I exit read mode from above the green R and press the solo button on the brass solo button on the Kappa guitar solo track, the brass track also goes to mute as it should. And yet when I press the read button from above, again in this position, same situation, the brass track also goes back to solo position. I can't figure this out. So one thing that, just out of curiosity, and if you want to send me just a project file, I'd be happy to kind of play with it. But let's say if we do have mute automation going on, that could have an impact if there's existing mute automation. So if I look at this particular track, we can see that there is mute automation that's in the particular track. So when we come over, so that could have an impact. Also, make sure that the tracks, and I could tell this if you want to email the project to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. You don't have to send the audio files, but like here, we can see that these particular tracks are linked together. So see if there's if there are any links in the tracks as well, or if they're being sent to a VCA, so that could affect kind of the mute and solo status behavior with that. So let me, if you want to, I'd love to see the project, and I could probably give you some more information, but I can't really see from the screenshots if there's links or what the routing is, if they're being routed to a VCA, if they're being routed to a group, etc. All right. Let me go back to your questions here. All right, so we see from Michael Pierce. All right. Says regarding spectral layers, ARA was using it to remove feedback from a live recording yesterday. Awesome. And as a breakout window, I didn't spot a full screen mode. Am I being blind? All right, so let's come over here. Let's say if I want to come, all right. So if we come here, let's go to our track inspector. And so let's go to our spectral layers extension here. All right. So it may, so like as I maximize the window here, I can see it's kind of taking full screen, so it may not, there could be a title bar here depending on your operating system. But some people don't want this operating bar or the menus, but it looks like that's how Spectral Layers is set up. Let me know if that's what you mean by full screen mode, Michael Pierce. All right, great to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. And Michael's Pierce is just saying it's not his recording, by the way, so you wouldn't record with feedback. All right. All right, so we see Uno Momento says, thanks, I'll be back with a project file. That'd be great to see. All right, so we see Jazz Dude says the heat wave in Germany where he's at is over. He's 4 days of extreme heat last week. So, yeah, we kind of have it today. And one of our air conditioning units went bad. All right. So we see Mark Lawson just says, thanks for answering all my questions. So you're welcome, and thanks for asking all the questions. And you see from Mark Lawson says, are you able to show how VST Live works? So we'll take a quick look at it. So we'll just open it up here. My license has, I have to renew my license. So if you want, I could give a quick overview on Friday's live stream for VST Live. So Mark, if you want to be on Friday, I'd be happy to kind of give a walkthrough. I had to get a new license. Mine is kind of timed out for that, unfortunately. All right. All right, so Rashab just says, please tell Steinberg to give us a Cubase version of the audio effect rack, just like Ableton, please. So let me know what you're not able to do. And I'm not like, I don't use Ableton. So if you could give me an idea of like what the audio effect rack does versus what you have in Cubase, that would be, I'd be happy to see if we could, get it to do what you want to do. All right. All right, so we see Michael Pierce also wants to see a bit of VST Live. We'll do that on Friday when I get my license renewed. Sorry about that. Make a note to that. So yeah, Rashab, if you could let me know what the audio effect rack does, because we may have the same functionality, but may not. Maybe it's just handled differently. But if you could let me know, that would be welcome. I'd be happy to try to show you if we could do something equivalent. All right. See, we're at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more that come in. Yeah, Mark Lawson, I just see says I'm going to be doing small live gigs, weddings, and starting to make my own backing tracks and play solo until I build up a band. Yeah, so VST Live is great for that. So one is you could basically set up different parts, and parts could be in a song, and a song could be in a set list. So you could change all those different things. But as you're playing live, like when you get to a particular point, it could send a program change for you. It can make sure that the previous notes don't get cut off. You could have, if you're singing, you could have a lyric track that will be in sync and will automatically send it to like an iPad or an iPhone. You could control lighting. You could also have different functionality so that if you wanted to have the chords come up on an iPad as well, that like as the project is playing, you could just have the chords going across for the whole band. So lots of great stuff that you could do. So we'll take a look at it in more detail on Friday. All right. We'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. If not, we could wrap up just a little bit early. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. And for those people who are new to the live stream, welcome to the community. And we're just sitting here on Tuesdays and Fridays trying to help you get up to speed so that you could use your tools more effectively, use them smarter, so that you could realize your creativity. All right, we see the artist known as Love wants everyone to hit the like button. So let's see if there's other questions. All right, so we see Soren is Sir N68, just saying thanks and bye. Okay, so we see all right, so we see maybe from Jazz Dude who says the effects go from left to right. So let me know if if it is something like what we have in Wavelab, where if we let's say if we have a couple plugins here, that we could have these kind of tabbed like this. Is this like what the Ableton rack is doing? So let me know if that's kind of what it's doing, something like that. All right. See, Mark Lawson says he's going to watch back as he missed most of the stream. Okay, so we see Mark Lawson just says, what time is the stream on Friday UK time? So it's usually 1 p.m. US Eastern, so I believe that would be 6 p.m. in the UK, as you're 5 hours. We're 5 hours later than you, so I think 6 p.m. usually starts at the same time. All right, so we see from Rashab says, again, please tell us if it's the Cubase version audio effect rack like Ableton, or make it better. So yeah, if you want to, Rashab, if you want to send a picture, I'd be happy to kind of pass along the information or see, but I don't know what the Ableton effect rack, the audio effect rack in Ableton is. All right. I'm sure the people at Steinberg do, as they're aware of all different things. All right, so we'll see if there's any more questions. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you want to send questions in advance, you could go to Club Cubase at steinberg.de and send questions, and we'll just give it our minute and see if there's other questions that pop in. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and we'll be back, and we do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. All right, so you see Michael Pierce Soup will be forthcoming in a stream near you soon. So it seems like it might be too hot for a lot of people in the Northern Hemisphere for Soup. All right, let's see if there's, give it another 10 seconds and then we'll wrap up. All right, so I guess with that, we are just seeing. Okay, so you could stack multiple parallel effects chains at one place. Okay, so I'll mention that to Steinberg team. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. But if you want to send me like a quick screenshot, because we might be able to do something similar. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and end the live stream. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you have questions you want to send in advance, send it to clubcubase at steinberg.de. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Goodbye.